What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and whatever time it is. Welcome back to another video with you, man, Mr. Holic. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 4 of my Spartan Pharaoh campaign for Total War Rome 2 using the Divide et Impera mod. Ladies and gentlemen, last episode we dealt with a very heavy Egyptian counterattack, and this time we're now going to go back on the offensive. And now, before we get into it, though, I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of our current situation. So you can see here in the center we own Egypt proper itself. We own all of the territory around the Nile. I have one army hanging out at Alexandria here as our garrison levy army. I now have Cleomenes III recruiting a new Spartan army, and then to the southeast at Myos Hormos, I have King Arius leading our very elite proper Spartan army. Now there's some Egyptian armies to the west, and then Egypt also has territory to the east and to our far north in southern Anatolia, so that is going to be a bit of a pain to deal with later on. I'm going to have to definitely work on a navy. However, in the meantime, I'm going to be focusing on heading east and trying to deal with Jerusalem. If I can take the large city over there, then we'll be able to hold any more advances from us from the east. But we also still hold Crete up here in the north, and Sparta itself, the homeland, is actually still under our control. But as you can see, there are a couple Egyptian navies out here. The icons are towards the top of the screen there. The small little red boats indicate enemy navies. But like I said, we are going to go for Jerusalem here in the east. Once we secure that, I'm going to use that as a bit of a buffer to keep any further Egyptian armies coming at us from the east, and then we'll sort out the western flank. However, in the meantime, I'm trying to figure out our diplomacy. A lot of people aren't really liking us too much. We do have a few trade partners at the moment, but right now the main thing I'm trying to get is allies, proper allies, and Rome is actually fairly willing, so that's going to be very helpful in our campaign moving forward. However, in the meantime, Jerusalem is waiting for us. We have this one army blocking us. They're stationed outside the city in a fort that they've recently built. We need to tear it down, and King Arius has just the army for it. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We're attacking the Egyptians. And here we are with the army just specifically dealt with, or designed for, I should say, dealing with forts and cities. We have a lot of ballista, we have some very good skirmishers. However, our hoplites are not necessarily ideal, but we do have a lot of swordsmen to support them, which we'll see coming forward. To begin this small, I guess you could call it a mini siege, I have my ballista bombard the enemy for quite a while. I really took my time with this battle. I didn't want to lose my troops needlessly to their towers, so I had my archers come up and deal with them real quickly. In DEI, they catch fire very quickly, but they take a while to burn down, so if you're going to try and do this, I'd recommend you have your archers fire their shots and then pull back instantly. Here you can also see my slingers are getting involved and getting a fair bit of damage despite the enemy hiding behind walls. They do rotate their troops out as I damage their units, and they have pikemen who are going to hold off a little bit better against our slingers, especially due to that wall right in front. Maybe I should have went and burned it down, but I didn't want to provoke the enemy to charge out too quickly. However, the enemy never did charge out, and so what I did was I broke up my archers into 2 different contingents, and I flanked the fort on either side. On the right hand flank, I'd actually focused fire on the enemy general, and he ends up routing from the battlefield. I didn't get to kill him, he did escape, but at the very least it will deal a decent morale blow to the enemy troops. Morale blow, I should say. I've also destroyed the rest of the archers' towers in the meantime, so we're looking pretty good so far. However, the enemy does have a lot of skirmishers, so I'm very hesitant to send in my hoplites. They're very hard to replace, and so I'm going to try and use our second-class citizen units here, our perioikoi units, to get in and get the job done, along with some Galatian mercenaries. While that's all happening, though, and we finally get the majority of the enemy's army engaged in our troops, I'm going to be having my hoplites move around the flank and literally just go through the walls. We're going to set fire to a bunch of them and bulldoze our way through. So This battle is funny. It's going to be kind of backwards. My swordsmen are the main line, and my hoplites, my very slow, heavy units, are going to be our relatively fast outflanking force. They weren't too fast necessarily, but they were fast enough in that they managed to flank the enemy before the battle was over, I guess. Like I said, they are very heavy troops. Some of the heaviest you can get in the early game, so I'm not expecting too much from them, but at the very least I hope that they can give some decent morale penalties to the enemy. We managed to knock down a bunch of the enemy walls here, so my hoplites do have quite a lot of room to maneuver, and now that they're actually getting inside the fort itself, we can just start grinding the enemy down while dealing those morale penalties. I will get some flaming shot into the enemy on the top right corner, but pretty low on ammunition by this point. I spent a lot of time just shooting my slingers and arrows from my archers quite a while, but we start to get some large routes happening, especially on the left-hand flank there, so my swordsmen and my hoplite unit over there are going to come in and help deal with the rest of the enemy Egyptians. I'm trying not to let too many of them escape, so I will let my Galatians go and chase down the enemy units, because if I defeat the enemy army here, but I don't kill them all, then I'll have to face them in another battle, since they will escape, and I don't have cavalry to chase them down either. Our hoplites are getting in, they're crushing the enemy like a little very tough sandwich here. Wow, just the wording, that's amazing, isn't it? But you know what I mean, we are sandwiching the enemy, outflanking them, and there isn't a lot that they can do now. Their skirmishers are stuck in a melee fight, which is one of the good things about a fort. It kind of forces the enemy to engage you. They can't just sit back and use all of their ammunition. Generally, they'll get drawn into physical melee combat pretty quickly, and that's what's happened here. So thankfully, I haven't lost too many of my hoplites. My Galatians took some hits though, and my Periorkoi swordsmen also took some hits. But regardless, we still win the day and we overrun the enemy fort. Now it's time for Jerusalem. Here are the statistics if you want to have a look yourself. My slingers unfortunately didn't get too many kills, but the enemy was inside a wall, which makes it hard for their stones to have a very good effect. My Periorkoi swordsmen did excellent though. My hoplites did pretty well, especially considering they were doing a flanking maneuver and they were attacking. You're not going to expect a lot of kills from hoplites then. My Galatian swordsmen, the units with the big red shields and the long brown tunic on the left hand side of the screen, they did excellent, and they're going to be crucial throughout the rest of this campaign. I feel like they are definitely lacking in the armor department, but the ferocity is definitely up there. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to use them throughout the rest of the campaign. But unfortunately, because the enemy general escaped, I do have to hunt him down and waste some time doing that. But we won't really lose any troops at all. It's not too much of a big deal, and it just means we'll have to wait another month until we take Jerusalem. And here we are with the siege of Jerusalem now. I immediately assaulted the city. I'm counting on my ballista and my ladders to get me in. This is going to be a hard one. And here you can see why it will be a hard one. It is a massive city with a lot of towers around it. I am going to be trying to focus my attack on the western gate, where there's very few towers. However, once we get into the city, depending on how the enemy is set up, we still have to deal with a lot of towers hitting our flank. So this is going to be a rough one. But if we could take Jerusalem, then it can stop any armies coming our way towards Alexandria, and we can get a little bit more breathing room for us. Here's our army over here. Slingers at the front with a ballista. I also have my Galatians and some mercenaries and the Periorkoi swordsmen in the first major line, or at least the first melee line, and then in the rear I'm keeping my Spartan hoplites in reserve. I don't want to use them too early in the battle. I want to try and save them for a later point. Especially I want to save them for once the enemy towers are down, if they get down at all, but I'm counting on my ballista to help me out with that. And I actually get pretty lucky with my ballista. For the most part, they do what they need to do. We bombard the enemy on the walls. They get a few casualties. You'll even see here in just a moment. We killed some enemies in the background as well, so that was helpful. So any kills that they get at all against the enemy units will help you. The enemy has a large garrison. They're not necessarily very good, their units, but numbers can be everything in certain situations. That's one thing the Spartans really struggle with. So while my ballista are finishing up their ammunition, using last of it on the city now, they destroyed 2 of the enemy towers, and they created 2 holes in the wall for me. It was really, really excellent. I got pretty lucky on that, to be honest. I'm surprised I did that well. But despite doing that though, I am going to have my swordsmen use the ladders as well as the holes in the wall. By the way, I was able to use the ladders so close to the wall, or place them so close, because my Periokoi swordsmen have guerrilla deployment, so I snuck them up there at the very start of the battle without taking any losses, so that was very cheeky. My mercenary cavalry is stopping an enemy sortie from the walls, which is very good actually, because their skirmishes are probably the biggest threat to my troops. They'll kill a lot of my guys for very little loss against them. So it's good that my cavalry was able to drive them back. In the meantime though, we are beginning our assault. The right hand flank is probably the most well guarded of the holes in the wall. So on the left hand flank, I'm trying to pour in troops and trying to create as much of a beachhead as possible against the enemy, so that I can send in more reinforcements straight after. I'm not even going to let my Periokoi swordsmen throw their javelins. I'm just going to let them get into melee straight away, keep the Egyptians at bay so I can pour in more troops behind them. And here I am lining them up behind them now. So we're going to be trying to do that very quickly. My cavalry are actually burning down the city gate, but at this point it doesn't matter all that much. There's no real point to using the gate, but I figured I would just in case I needed it. My archers are supporting on the left flank, while on the right hand flank we're doing very well actually. The enemy Egyptians have started to focus on our left hand breach. So on the right I'm going to be pushing forward with my units over the walls, and we'll be trying to outflank the enemy that's holding our right hand breach here. Now that the battle is starting to progress though, I am going to be sending up my hoplites. In fact, I already have a unit up here now, but some of my units are taking casualties, especially some of my hoplites, which I really don't like. Even though it seems pretty light, losing 20-30 men per unit, that's going to add up at the end of the day, and that's going to take almost the entire population of a city of that specific class of unit to replenish, which is a very big deal. It's going to be an ongoing issue throughout the entire Spartan campaign, and I'm not sure if I can even combat it, to be honest. But anyway, I managed to engage the enemy skirmishers pretty much across the board. I also even sent in my cavalry on the left-hand side to deal with the enemy that was being held in reserve, especially their archer units back there. And then I also sent in King Ares himself. He wanted to get involved in the fighting, lead the troops from the front as a true Spartan king should. And so he's going to do actually fairly well despite him being just a hoplite unit. And then the rest of my reserves are now pouring into the wall now. And the right hand breach is completely under our control. We're now outflanking the enemy at every single opportunity we can. It's pretty much done at this point. Here is the enemy general in a spearman unit holding. However, my Periokoi swordsmen and my mercenary cavalry are just going to be too much for him. We are going to get some nice flanking charges on him. Doesn't necessarily matter that my cavalry isn't heavy. They're still going to get some kills, and the main thing they're going to do is have a morale penalty against him. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have Jerusalem. We get a decisive victory, and the garrison surrenders. Here are these statistics yet again. Once again, though, my slingers really didn't have that much of a good of effect. Neither did my archers, although in sieges it's often quite hard to have slingers do very well when you're the one attacking. But my hoplites that did get into the fighting did pretty well, and my swordsmen did okay. But for the most part, I was able to rout the enemy and then kill them as they were routing, so that's why a lot of the enemy died. They just didn't have the morale to stand up against our elite force, and for that we lose just under 600 troops to take Jerusalem, which is definitely not bad whatsoever. Dare I say, it's probably one of the best sieges against Jerusalem in its history. But I am going to need a few months to recuperate my army. I'm going to get rid of some of my mercenaries who are depleted, and then for the rest of my troops I'll let them replenish, and then we'll continue our march in the west now now that we have a buffer on the eastern side of our kingdom. In the meantime, out here in the west, we are now marching on Ammonium, sending out Cleomenes III. He is our heir to the kingdom, to the empire that we're now creating. He's a reformer. He has not undergone his reforms just yet, though, so in the meantime, he's marching out with a force of periodical hoplites, which is very different to our usual. He also has quite a few mercenaries with him and some ballista, which I'll show you guys shortly. But he's taking a lot of attrition on this march, so this is going to be a little bit of a tricky first test for him in battle. But if he wants to be the heir to Sparta, he's got to learn how to deal with tough situations. Such is the Spartan way. In the meantime, though, I'm going to be sending King Arius up north towards Tyros. I knew that the Egyptians had another full stack army up here, so I was very suspicious of it. I wasn't sure what it was going to do. However, Tyros would be very juicy to have, and it would basically kick the Egyptians out of Syria, and it would kick them out of having any chance of attacking eastern Egypt from land. So if I could take Tyros, that would be a major win for us. I was originally just going to hold out in Jerusalem and debate on trying to defend, or I was even nearly going to create a puppet state out of Jerusalem. But in the meantime, I figured, you know what, screw it. The Egyptians aren't being overly aggressive. I know that they're fighting the Seleucids to the northeast here, so maybe the Seleucids will give me some support. But in the meantime, I'm actually just going to go ahead and siege Tyros. I nearly auto-resolved it here, but because I knew the Egyptians were just less than a turn away with a full stack army, I figured I better not. And instead, we're going to just continue to siege, and I will assault the city myself later manually. However, in the meantime, we are going to go back, and we're going to deal with our assault in the west first before we worry too much about the east. I did try to assassinate the enemy general here, but our spy kind of sucks. Eventually she will get good, but for now, having a lot of bad luck with her. You can see the Egyptians still have a full stack army just west of Alexandria too, keeping my army at Alexandria stationed there to protect our new capital. However, in the meantime, we are now attacking Ammonium under Cleomenes III. And here we are, the Lions of Sparta are waiting. How awesome was that? That was entirely by accident. I was just trying to get some close-up shots of our units, and there was a lion just chilling. But anyway, he's a good mascot for the army. I nearly said for Legion, but no, must have called it a Legion. Here are our periodicoi hoplites. Some of you might think, who cares? They're just hoplites. They're actually very different to the Spartans in that they are second-class citizens of Sparta, so they are not very well equipped nor well trained. But here is our first-class units of Sparta on cavalry. On horses as a cavalry unit. That's right. I'm doing something a little bit different. The Spartans were very rough when it comes to cavalry. They often relied on mercenaries, if not entirely on mercenaries. So I'm doing something a little bit different with that. This army is very unorthodox, and it represents Cleomenes' reform nature, and that he is very much willing to try new things. And speaking of which, we have Egyptian archers here in the rear, or in the center I should say, with Greek officers, and then in the rear here we have Spartan hoplites and Cleomenes III himself leading his personal bodyguard into the army, with some ballista behind him, of course. But this is going to be a very different army. The hoplites will be pretty much second class, or quite literally second class when compared to Spartan hoplites, and our skirmishing force is basically just Egyptian archers that actually don't have a lot of ammunition. But anyway, we begin bombarding the town. The enemy garrison doesn't like that. I know, shock. So they send out their troops to attack me across the line. However, they don't do it in a united front, and because of that, I'm actually going to be able to pick them apart fairly slowly. They do engage my left flank on my center with my hoplites, but in the meantime, I'm going to be chasing their cavalry away while bombarding the general, who's coming out with a very large bodyguard of some additional units accompanying him. So while he's taking his time coming out, I'm just going to go ahead and charge the enemy spearmen. I'm going to outflank them. My cavalry is going to deal with their cavalry for the most part. Our Spartan horsemen do get a little bit carried away and get stuck behind enemy lines, but they will come out and help out. But here I am outflanking the enemy spearmen, and even though they're in a decent shield wall formation, getting outflanked like that by swordsman units, they're just gone. It's not happening. They just can't stand it. My cavalry is getting chased by native townsfolk, but they're nobodies basically, they're peasants. We will deal with that without any issue. The left-hand flank is taking a little bit longer to deal with since they had more troops there, but my Galatians will deal with them soon enough. In the meantime, the enemy cavalry gets too close. My archers manage to kill them. However, my archers are very low on ammunition. I'm not too sure why it is, but the Egyptian archers that were levied from the local cities just don't have a lot of ammunition, or perhaps they just shoot very quickly. I'm not too sure on that. But either way, it's very different compared to the other archers I'm using. At least that's how I feel. But in the meantime, the enemy actually was dealing some decent damage against our hoplites with their skirmishers, so I'm going to force my hoplites to advance across the line. My Galatians on the left are now winning and have dealt with a bunch of the enemy spearmen, so they're going to engage pretty quickly. On the right hand flank, my cavalry are going to move up while being supported by Egyptian swordsmen. Also, Cleomenes will lead Spartan hoplites in the rear just in case something happens, but for the most part he won't play too much of a major role in this battle.
Egyptian infantry!
Pretty quickly though, it looks like things are going our way. Most of the enemy army routes fairly easily, however we do take quite a few casualties. It might have something to do with our units being depleted from the desert before they even got engaged in the fight. However, it doesn't matter, we are going to have the town. My hoplites try to get involved in the action in the end, but regardless, it doesn't matter. The town is ours. And here we have a decisive victory. Now you can see my Spartan cavalry, while I had severe doubts about them, they actually did pretty okay. They nearly got 300 kills, and none of that was against troops that were routing, or at least most of it shouldn't be. So they actually did quite well, although I am going to try and recruit auxiliary or mercenary cavalry as soon as I can, because I still don't want to waste my precious, proper Spartan citizens. For Ammonium, though, we're actually going to liberate the town, and I'm going to try and create a client state out of this new civilization, the Siwa. I believe they are a nomadic desert faction. However, they're not going to take a client status from us. At least not yet, but they will accept a military alliance for now. And in the meantime, we will be attacking Tyros. However, that will be for the next video. So ladies and gentlemen, in this video we finally took Jerusalem. We're making some major progress against the Egyptians. We're almost done. They're almost over, and we finally have our new kingdom in Egypt. It's now starting to prosper. So thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.